Western man, is this the end of masculinity? Are we done with being men? My name is John Paul from bravefathers.com, and today we are going to look at how I see the current state of masculinity in the West and perhaps worldwide. So the first thing that I want us to consider is, what is actually masculinity? And that's a term that we'll be working on defining as we go through this show. Oh my goodness, I don't have my... Hold on one second, let me... I need my candles when I'm bringing the prophecy to you. Thank you for your patience. So we are going to be working on a definition of masculinity that we can comprehend, because I don't believe there is a definition of masculinity that you can simply encompass in a few words, that you can just contain in words. And the reason why I say that is, I view masculinity as an absolute force of nature. It's its own spiritual realm, its own emotional realm, its own physical realm. And so trying to define it in an intellectual way, I think, takes away from what it is. It's similar to the old proverb story, a parable perhaps, about three blind people describing an elephant, and one touches the tail, one touches a leg, one holds a trunk, and each one thinks that that's what the elephant is, because none of them can see the whole picture. And I say this because the best way to enjoy masculinity is through letting it develop, right? You allow a male to develop the traits that a male has, and if it's natural and if there is no deviation, if there is no disturbance in the process, no, what's the word? No, I can't even find the word. There's a word, defect, but there's a word. I'm going to find that word. When there's no interference with the process, the boy, the male, will grow into a man and have masculine traits. And those masculine traits essentially polarize the male, not against, but polarize in relation to females. So there are some things that males and females will never agree on because of the matter of perception. And I would argue that when it comes to leadership, males have a wider range of perception than females. And when it comes to emotional understanding, I would argue females have a wider range of perception than males, which is why males are great for building structure, right? So we always say the male is great at building a house and the female is great at building a home. But the male must provide that structure. So that's an example of masculinity at work. It creates structure. And the reason why I'm asking this question, if Western men have decided that this is the end of masculinity, is that there's only one trait that is associated with masculinity these days that is sort of being exhibited, and that's aggression. It's not a trait exclusive to males, but there is a form of masculine aggression, and is always, or most of it is directed towards other men. And my position is that the reason why we have this aggression towards other males is because the Western males have had to suppress their masculinity for decades now, if not centuries. And with the acceleration of social media, that has just acted as a catalyst for that suppression. So now, what males do is they seek out another male to destroy him, because the only trait that is left for him to feel a sense of attachment to his masculinity is that aggression, which is akin to a blind man holding a tail of an elephant and saying an elephant is a thin, long piece of meat, which it's not, of course. And I've been thinking a lot about it, and it's something I really want to explore, because I want to argue that most Western men don't even know what masculinity is, and I don't mean of a definition. They've never experienced it because they've suppressed it in themselves, and the males around them suppress it in themselves, and they don't allow it to come through. And I've noticed a lot actually identify more with the females than they identify with themselves. Especially those who talk about modern masculinity, which of course there is no such thing. There's no such thing as modern masculinity or old school masculinity or old masculinity. Masculinity has always been and always will be. It's an absolute. It cannot be new, it cannot be old. It's like we don't have new oxygen. Oxygen is oxygen, right? H2O, water is water. A kiss is still a kiss, right? If you're a fan of the movie Casablanca, you get that reference. Great movie, by the way. Watch Humphrey Bogart in that movie. And we'll come to that in a moment. Let me write that down. Humphrey Bogart. Because at the time, some considered him as an epitome of masculinity. But I want to address that. So, a kiss is still a kiss. Oxygen is still oxygen. Masculinity is still masculinity. So the people who think in terms of modern masculinity, my argument is that they identify with females because they've already disassociated themselves from masculinity itself and assigned it a new value. And as soon as you deflect from actual masculinity, it's not masculinity anymore. That is the power of it. That is the importance of it. It is not something that can be diluted. It's not something that can be modified. It just is. And it exhibits itself in various traits when allowed to function properly. So, on the subject of modern masculinity, essentially what it means is I don't have to be responsible. I don't have to lead. I don't have to be in charge. It's okay for me to defer to the female. It's okay for me to just let out my emotions indiscriminately in public and otherwise. It's okay for me to not really focus on anything specific. I don't have to build anything. I don't have to create anything. I don't have to protect anything. I find a female partner. She lays down long enough for me to come, and that's called sex. And yeah, it's just basically free-flowing because it's modern. You see, because anything that's not masculine is feminine. There are very few things that actually, you could argue some things are neutral, but I don't know about that, so I can't speak to that. But for the purposes of reality, as we live it as humans, if it's not masculine, it's feminine. Now, this does not mean that you are supposed to be hyper on any trait that you have as a male. So like aggression, right? The masculine aggression, that you don't have to be hyper aggressive. It does not mean that if you cry, that makes you feminine, right? It makes you human. You're a person. It does not mean that if you are selfish as a man, which you should be, that you don't care, because I believe caring is part of selfishness, right? If I'm selfish, I automatically take care of anybody and everything that's part of me. It's part of myself. It's an extension of me. It's my domain. It's my territory. And I dare say my property in some aspects. So all these things have been given such a negative spin that males are resorting to a feminine version of masculinity, which they think will make them acceptable to females, which it doesn't, which they think will gain them favor with females, And worse still, they think that is the way to orient themselves towards females. So female approval is paramount, right, to most males today. The decision that they make about anything has to be preceded by an analysis. What will females think of this? How would they feel about this? If they don't like it, I may not want to do it, which is weakness, which is deviation from being masculine. But we are seeing more and more males go in that direction and say that's the modern way, thinking they can redefine masculinity, which you can't. You can't mold masculinity, because then it's not masculinity. You can't change it. It is. It just is. It's an absolute. Now, we'll dive deeper, but let me take a side angle to attack it from another angle. So I watched 3 movies recently that had fathers in it. So of course, as we are here at bravefathers.com, we want to analyze things from the father's perspectives, right? So the 3 movies I watched, in no particular order, were The Masters of the Universe, so He-Man, and Armageddon with Bruce Willis, brilliant movie, really good movie. And most recently, actually, The Invite with Seth Rogen, Penelope Cruz, what's his name? Edward Norton, I believe, and Olivia Wilde. Was it just those 4 people in the movie? I think, yeah. No, well, there was some other extras in the beginning, but mostly them, right? And I was trying to look at it, at how is the world portrayed today? How is the increase of this modern masculinity input into these movies and the media and trying to force it on the public consciousness? And also, I was looking at how fathers are perceived. And I wanted specifically to look at the difference between how it happened, say, I think 20 years ago. I think Armageddon was made in 2004, released. I don't know, I don't remember, so don't quote me on that. But how that was portraying fatherhood versus how fatherhood is portrayed today. And in all 3 movies, even though we don't see that in all of them, but in all 3 movies, there were daughters, right? So in The Invite, the daughter, we don't see her because she's gone on a sleepover. And what's interesting is that Olivia Wilde's character says something which is very emblematic, very symbolic of today's modern thinking about men and fatherhood. When the father expressed some concern about their daughter going on a sleepover without him knowing, and she's about 12 years old, she said, there are no men and there are no guns in the house, so it's safe. Right? So think of the number of implications that come from that. The negative view, the negative stance on masculinity right away, just from that sentence, one sentence. There are no men and no guns in the house, so it's safe. Now, any man knows that that's crazy thought, right? It's crazy thinking. Because if there's no man, who's going to protect the females? Right? From themselves and from a woman and men who might endanger them. And there's no gun. I'm not necessarily a gun advocate, but if there's no weapon, that leaves the place vulnerable, right? And I'm not saying, let's go crazy on all that stuff. That's not what the topic is. But the implication is, the very things that are there to protect them, right? Because it's a single mother that is hosting it, the sleepover. So the man is not there, therefore it's safe now. Implying that men are, by necessity, a danger. And yes, we are dangerous. It's in our nature to be dangerous. But that does not mean we are a danger to everybody who comes around us. And when people are in our domain, we tend to protect them, right? But that's not the portrayal here. We are being told there is no man, she's single, so it's safe. That also implies that a single mother is safer than a woman with a man. And we have this messaging in there. But you know what's worst about it? A lot of males will agree with it. Because males have been taught to hate each other, to look down on each other, to see each other as threats, to see others as objects to attack, to prove our worth. All a female needs to do is to point a finger, and there's a bunch of males ready to attack him. So, to some degree, I understand those males who choose to be modern, masculine, whatever that means, because it removes them from equation. It says, hey, I'm not a threat. Leave me in peace. I'm just a weakling. I'm not part of the fight. I'm not saying I agree with it. I can understand why they would feel that way. Some also essentially hate men because they realize that when a man is masculine, allows himself to develop his masculine traits, he's more attractive to women. And in fact, the invite has a lot of that in it, but I don't want to spoil the movie, but there's an interesting plot twist. The movie is worth watching if you're interested in the subject, by the way, of male-female dynamics in the modern way. If you're looking for a great movie to watch, I can't recommend it. But it's worth watching if you're interested in these dynamics, if you want to see the modern dynamics at play. So from a movie perspective, from a film perspective, to me, it was just like an expensive pet project. That's my perspective on the movie, right? Then we look at the Masters of the Universe. We have another daughter, don't know the actress's name, and her father is Idris Elba, whoever he's playing. And she's very disrespectful, very unruly, and very rude towards her father. But he accepts it. Fair enough, he was drinking too much in the movie, so her anger might have been warranted, but I don't accept that kind of rude behavior. And what's interesting is she did that throughout the movie. Quite disdainful, quite patronizing towards her father, and very, very rude. And there's a lot of disdain in the whole Masters of the Universe towards anything that is male or masculine or men in general, right? There's a lot of that. And I know you've seen this in many movies, but it's very intense in that because it's supposed to be He-Man, right? So even they laugh at the name, He-Man. And if you grew up watching He-Man, you know how, fun it was to watch He-Man, how inspiring it was to watch him with his sword and his tiger and all that. It was quite a while since I watched an episode, but I used to love it. I used to find Skeletor quite funny. So now, we see a lot of that disdain. Then we come to Armageddon. And then there is another father and there's another daughter. And interestingly enough, she is rebelling against the father. I believe she's a young adult at the time. And she is kind of rude and disrespectful. However, she didn't go to the extent of that was done in the other movies. And also, there was still a degree of reverence and respect in all that. There was like a boundary she wouldn't cross, right? Even though she overstepped a few boundaries, but it was generally, you could see it was a rebellion. So that was quite a contrast because there was a reason why she was also rebelling. She wasn't just being rude and disrespectful for no reason, which I'm not saying she was right to be disrespectful, but it was regarding a specific issue, which, to be fair, she was an adult at the time and she felt she needed to be respected as one, which is a fair argument, right? But in general, she was still respectful of the father and doing what the father asked her to do. She was still working for the father. But what's interesting is, towards the end of the movie, and as the movie progressed, she increasingly changed her behavior. she started becoming more and more respectful as she matured. And she apologized to the father for the wrong that she did, for the way she treated him, for the way she acted towards him. She even said, look, I'm like you, Dad. She wants to be like him. So ultimately, she paid homage and showed respect to the father. And what's interesting is the guy who she wanted to marry, which was Ben Affleck in the movie, he told her to take care of his little girl, right? That's what the father told him. But he also told her to take care of him. He told her to take care of her husband. So there was that respect, which just shows you that only, 2 decades ago or so, there was a completely different attitude towards men. So within one generation, everything has changed, because in the other parts, there was no resolution, there was no respect, because now even men don't want to be men. I always see a lot of that these days. Even men don't want to be men. I mentioned Humphrey Bogart as well in Casablanca, right? So because people used to think that he was the most masculine man, or an example of a masculine man. And what's interesting is that he was, but that does not mean that you should emulate him. You know, I don't like the advice where people emulate James Bond or He-Man or anybody, including myself, as a role model to be. Because every man has to find his own path. You have to find your own way of being, how you express yourself. But it has to be genuine and it has to be natural. It can't just be trying to please people in society around you, because then you'll just be weak. You'll not be a man in the fullest meaning of it. And it's difficult and it's painful sometimes and it's hard. It's very hard. So, as I keep thinking about it, I'm looking at all these social media posts. I don't want to get political, so I'm not going to mention the exact topics, but the common trend is, hey, those guys over there, let's just attack them. Then there's others who make an argument, for example, that the dating is broken, right? And a man does not think that way. A man who has allowed himself to develop fully as a man, not do the things that, go to the gym, get a good job, and find a girlfriend. Those are just like 3 things of life. There are so many other things in life. So many. And when you allow yourself to develop yourself fully, you will see that dating is not broken, but most males, and I will accept that females too, have given up on being their gender, their natural sex that they were born with, which makes them less attractive to the other sex. But for all those who are serious about dating, they don't have a problem meeting people or finding people. It's not easy to find a person that you're compatible with no matter what. If everybody was friendly and open and nice, you still struggle to find the person. To be honest, the biggest issue really when it comes to dating is rejection that people cannot stand, which is just part of the game. Now, I know there is an increase in false allegations and lies. Of course, working with fathers, having been through the system myself, I know that this is true. But that is not something to do actually with dating. It's more a societal thing. And again, if you're open to it and you are really confident in yourself, you will start meeting people that are great for you. You will have fun dating, which relationships will never be easy no matter what we do, because you are dealing with human beings, right? But when I see men propagating this message that dating is broken, it further leads more and more males, more men to give up on being men, because they stop adopting traits that are not helpful, like being constantly afraid of rejection, not even looking for someone, being completely passive about it. That's not the way. That's not the way. But unfortunately, that's where we've come to today. Because it's a man's drive to find a woman, a suitable woman for him, or multiple women, and have relationships with them. That's just what men do. But instead, people think that the commercial alternative is equivalent. It's not. And as men, it's difficult for us to accept, but I can see why, but it's difficult for us to accept that we've not developed our dating skills. We've not developed our dating ability. Look, I know there are guys who've never approached a woman they consider a 10 out of 10, looked her in the eyes and expressed interest in her. I would argue that probably most men have never done that in their whole lives. But you have to do some of those things before you can say dating is broken. Because part of becoming a man is going for what you want. Part of being a man is going for what you want. So you have to be willing to be rejected. You have to be willing to be rejected 1,000 times, literally, not figuratively, to find the woman you actually want. And that's something most of us have not developed the emotional wherewithal to be able to do that. So I'd rather get rejected 0 times and have 0 results. You know, we have men focusing on looks. Like we have this clavicular character who has got a cult following, bless him. But he's totally feminine in his ways. That is the most feminine thing you could do. I'm gonna looks max in order to attract women. That's feminine. Yes, you should take care of your looks, take care of yourself, take care of your body, groom yourself and all that. But that's just part of being a responsible adult. You are not going to get more women really wanting you. Yes, they may look at you, but a woman looking at you means nothing. Even a woman complimenting you means nothing. A woman giving you a number in reality means nothing. I know a lot of people are not ready to hear that, but it means nothing. My point is, we are so far removed from the reality of what man does or what a man gets in life that we started settling for crumbs. So a guy will put on some makeup and thinks mission accomplished. A guy will go to the gym, get some muscles, get a compliment from a female, and thinks mission accomplished. Oh, yeah, this looks Maxington is working. A woman said something nice to me. That's how depraved we have been of any positive attention as men. That even a compliment makes us think that's something special, right? But when you allow yourself to develop, yes, you may enjoy a compliment, but you are indifferent to it, just like you're indifferent to the rejection, because you know your value. You start feeling a sense of self that comes from knowing yourself, which is what we are deprived of. So the question is, are we done now? Are we done? Are we done with being men? And what would that look like for the next generation? You know, we've had an increase in knife crime, which I sort of predicted, because I said if you start treating these boys with this kind of energy and this kind of female energy, they're gonna become very aggressive in an uncontrolled manner. Because you cannot treat a boy like a girl, because he's not a girl. And if you don't allow boys an outlet to be boys, to compete with each other, they will turn that into aggression. If you don't allow boys to experience dominance, whether it's on the football field, in a boxing ring, or even in the academic world, they will turn that into aggression. And the truth is, in most things that are related, not all, but most things that are related to commerce, that are related to governance, and athleticism, males will always generally outperform females. Always generally. But that's the truth. It is not oppression. It is the power of masculinity. That is the force of nature. That it is. But to create the illusion that masculinity is not that powerful and that males don't possess it, they try to push, females who are protected by society act aggressive because they don't expect consequences. And males act more like victims and think more like victims to protect themselves also from consequences, from taking risks. But when that happens for too long, it boils up inside. It boils up inside. Because that is not how we are built. And that's why these boys start getting violent with themselves, with each other. It's very sad when I watch the news and I see all these riots and all this hatred towards different groups. And everybody does have a point, and everybody is also wrong. But we are not at a time where we can actually have a discussion on it. But the more I look at it, the more I think about it, the more I believe a lot of it is just undue female influence. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is, a lot of males, when they don't learn how to individuate, how to separate their thinking from their mother especially, they perceive the world in a way that makes them too wary, too cautious, but also too quick to react, too reactive. I think that's the word, too reactive. Not because the female energy is bad in and of itself, because it's not. Just like masculinity is another form of force of nature. But it's not a good ingredient to mix at a certain stage of a boy's life. And it's definitely not a good ingredient to mix at a certain stage of a man's life. It's counterproductive and it's destructive. It's destructive. So a lot of people think they are fighting for something. And now all you need to say is, oh, this is how it affects women. And it justifies the aggressions. It justifies the violence. So that's an example of what I mean by undue female influence. It's not right these days, it's not accepted these days for a man to do something for himself just because. Right? And now, with the laws they're trying to bring in, a man cannot even build his wealth for himself. He must include the woman in it because. Why? Because the experiment failed. Because they tried to prove women are independent, and it's not true. Human beings are dependent on each other. We all depend on each other. I depend on you, you depend on me. Everybody depends on the society to one degree or another, but we all are dependent. But they also want to devalue the contribution of men in women's lives. And women foolishly listen to it. And yes, in the beginning, when you have a surplus, you don't see the results. But over the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, if you don't change this trend, it's the woman, the Western woman, who will suffer most. Because the Western men will just leave. They will leave the West, either amicably or by force. They will settle in other places. That's the end result of it. And the females will realize how much they need the man. Like, when you have something that really provides for you, takes care of you, a system, a group of people, it's very easy to take things for granted. People don't understand like how dependent we are on so many systems. Imagine if they just closed the water supply and you've never experienced that. No, most people are not ready for that. But just that one thing could change the whole society. We take it for granted because we take a shit in good water. Right? So we think, it's just water. But it's one of the most essential things we need, and it's one of the things that we take for granted. Food. Most people don't know what it's like not to have food. When I say not have to have, like really not have food. Where even if you wanted to scavenge in a rubbish dump, you couldn't find anything to eat. We take all those things for granted, but those are things that men predominantly supply through manual labor. Manual labor. And when that labor is done, it looks like, oh, yeah, we can take it for granted, but you can't. The same applies to law enforcement and so many other things that men give to society. So many things that men give to the society. So, what's the way forward? You see, on the societal level, that's how this affects us. But let's look at it at the individual level, right? So as you know, I work with fathers in family courts, especially when there's a false accusation or a set of false accusations, so that they can see their children. And one thing that I'm seeing in common is that most men are really, really naive when it comes to women. And even when they learn some things like the red pill, they are still naive because, again, red pill just gives you one angle. It just gives you one set of negative things, really, about women. It doesn't give you a fuller picture. And one thing that red pill does not teach is that all the things that males talk about when it comes to human nature, or women's nature actually, is how women react to men they don't respect and they don't value. So when people say, oh, women are hypergamous and are worried about hypergamy, they don't know that that's only because women don't value those men. So on the individual level, if a woman leaves you for a guy with more money, it just means she didn't like you that much. Period. How do I know this? Because when I've had nothing, I've had women take care of me. Women who had guys with money, offering them money and things, and those women stuck with me. I've lived with women where they paid all the bills, while I tried to figure out the business that I wanted to be in and worked on my ideas. So I know women will take care of you if they are serious about you. But to meet those women, you have to go out there and you can't be thinking that dating is broken. A lot of the things that people complain about dating, right? So we're getting more personal here. When I was meeting women, say 20 years ago, it was the same thing. It's nothing new to anybody who's been approaching women for decades or for years. It's nothing new. Part of the dating skill is knowing how to choose. And people wrongly teach to the inexperienced that women are the choosers. And how does that affect men? A man gets a woman who shows him some kind of interest, some kind of sexual interest. That's it. He settles with her. Like I can look at a couple now, not always, but a lot of the time I know that she's gonna cheat on him and he's gonna be brokenhearted, but he's gonna stay. You can just tell. And one of the ways you tell is you can see what he relies on to keep her. If he's relying on his looks, his money, his status, then yes, she is going to be hypergamous because that's what you are using. And most men are not taught to believe that intrinsically they have value. They actually don't believe it. So when they go to court and the system treats them that way, whilst they don't like it, they still go along with it. And they don't realize that they treat themselves the same way. They don't realize that they have undervalued themselves. My neck is stiff. My shoulder. Slept on my shoulder. They don't realize that they undervalue themselves, and that's how they get themselves into these situations. Like, I know I undervalued myself. That's how I got myself in that situation. And that is a very difficult thing for people to accept. Most fathers can't accept it, which is why they can't make progress. And why should you accept it? Because when you realize you undervalued yourself, then you say, wait a minute, that means my value is higher than what I realize. My possibilities, my ability to move forward is higher than I thought. So let me learn what my actual value is. And then when you do that, that's when you become more effective. That's when you become more powerful. That's when you are in position to win. To win. But sadly, I see that same father, instead of directing his energy towards winning his court case, he takes that energy and goes online and complains about women, or complains about another group of people that he hates or he thinks he hates. That same father will go and pursue another female the same way he pursued the woman that is not allowing him to see his kids, not realizing he's putting himself in that same situation. Just because she's a bit nicer and you haven't changed, doesn't mean she's different. She will do the same thing to you, and this time it will be because she will think like, wait a minute, maybe the previous woman was right. Why? Because once that whole infatuation wears down, you realize, and she will realize that, wait a minute, this guy is not really the man I dream of. You cannot be the man a woman dreams of without saying to yourself, I am that valuable. Because I know why this is difficult for people, because that's what society has taught the Western man. Don't see yourself as important, as arrogant. That's what's the word? There's a word for it. Another, you see, I'm lost for words today. That's what, self-obsessive, psychotic. And when you watch The Invite, you see that at play as well. So again, if you're interested in these dynamics, that movie actually shows it quite a bit. Where a guy acts like he's all that, but he's just playing a character. He's just playing a character. And the movie is full of lies that people want to believe. But interestingly enough, the scenario is quite realistic. But then again, the things that are wrong in the movie, most people will not even spot that they are wrong because they become so normal. So a guy will be dominated by a female and thinks, oh yeah, modern masculinity doesn't require me to be the dominant one. And dominance is bad, except when it's done by the woman. That's how they think. That's how they think. I remember this guy So there's this girl, I was out, and this stupid guy is so annoying. He was asking me about some bullshit about what I put in my hair. I was like, listen, man, I don't think I want to have that discussion with you. He's like, oh, what's wrong? I was like, listen, I don't do that. And then he's turned to the girls, oh, he doesn't want to talk about his hair. I'm like, so are we living in times where men are discussing hair routines? I know that the looks marxers, that's what they do. If the looks marxers hate me, I don't think any looks marxer watches me anyway. But he was so hungry for the approval of those females, and she was like, yeah, I was like, what's wrong with these people? And I was just waiting for my cab. You know, and I know the modern world will make you think that this is normal, but it's not. It's a problem. It's really a problem. I'm not saying you can't ask your friend, hey, what shampoo do you use? I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to overdo it. But what I'm saying is there is something wrong if you take it so personal, if I say I don't want to have that discussion with you. Because I'm not your friend, first and foremost, and I don't do that. I don't do that because trying to be the object to be desired is a feminine trait. It's a feminine trait. And I think the biggest problem with modern masculinity, as it's called, because again, it's just being feminine, to be honest with you. The problem with that thinking is that essentially what it says is, let's not show the difference between males and females. Let's label what has been known as masculine as traditional and discard it because it's just a tradition, it's old, we don't need it anymore. We have a new way. So we want to erase those differences because the differences shows that there is advantages on the what the fuck is that? There's advantages that males have in a lot of things that society praises. Right? So they don't want women to be like, yeah, you say we are so strong and independent, but how come he's able to do this better than I do? How come he can code and, he writes 500 lines of code that work in a work week, but I can barely write 100. It happens. You see, and the problem here is not, look, there are women who can do a lot of things as well or better than men. I'm not disputing that. The problem is when a woman cannot do it, society allows it, and men, we are part of the society, we allow it just to make it look like they are equal, that we are the same, that we have the same capabilities, but we don't. We actually don't. We just attach value to these capabilities, emotional value, and we expect things, to work when they don't. And again, everybody should be given an equal opportunity, whether male, female, whatever. Like everybody should be given an equal opportunity. When somebody is not able to take advantage of that opportunity, then they can move on to a different opportunity. We don't need more of any gender in anything. I don't see why we need that divide, why we need to force it, except for political division. That's the only purpose it serves, political division. But it's destroying people, it's destroying families. Family is no longer valued. The heterosexual family is no longer valued. And interestingly enough, the people who fight for it cannot just say we want a heterosexual family. It has to be put under a guise of something else. It can't just be, I want to be a man, I want to build a life, a house, and I want to find a suitable woman to join me, to follow my plan that I have created for my family that I lead. You have to show evidence to people of how meek you've become, how subservient you've become to a female, how little you think of yourself. I hate it when older men put themselves down and call themselves all kinds of derogatory names because of their age. Are they not supposed to be the wise men who lead us? And to many men, I'm the older man now. Am I not supposed to be wise? Am I not supposed to lead and share wisdom and insights and knowledge and skills? Why would I call myself a derogatory name? Why? You know, there are people who are going to apply the kind of thinking I'm referring to on this planet. And you don't need this kind of thinking to succeed. I don't think you do. But you do need it if you want to be fulfilled as a man. If you want to be able to overcome all the negative things that have happened in your life and will happen in your life, you need all your power and strength to be able to do that. And whilst it's difficult, that's the only way forward. Life is difficult. Life is difficult. It's not easy. Every day we struggle on, we keep striving, we keep moving forward. Every day we overcome a challenge. Oh, she said no. So what? Oh, she left you. So what? Like, really? Look, I understand that it's painful when a woman leaves you, but come on. We cannot become so emotionally dependent that 3 years later, 4 years later, 10 years later, people are still thinking about an ex that left them. No. That's immaturity. That's not right. That's wrong focus. Is another human being who disappointed you. Yes, human beings disappoint you. Women are human beings too. So she will disappoint you. But when we reject this in the Western world, when we think we are enlightened, that intellect replaces heart, that being a man is not relevant, when we think we can redefine what being a man means, that's how we lose. And listen, no amount of going to the gym, no amount of making money, and even sleeping with women can replace your self-respect as a man. Nothing can do that. Because at the end of the day, that's all you really have left. Your integrity, your self-respect, your self-worth. So, as you go forward, as you look for things, solutions, as you look for solutions for the problems that you are facing, you have to be willing to take a stand for something. And when you take that stand, that is what will pull you through to the other side. That's what will help you to overcome things. And you have to be willing to be a man regardless of what the society wants you to be. You don't have to start adopting feminine manners just so that people feel comfortable. You don't have to start reducing yourself just so people feel comfortable. You don't have to start shrinking your character, your ability to do things. And I've done this too. But you don't have to. That is one of the biggest mistakes of my life. Doing that. Foolishly throwing away opportunities because I thought, I will always get another one and this person doesn't have my ability. and the person will squander it or move on to something else the moment it got hard. And we have enough people who are very passive about life. If you are here watching this, that means you are not one of those people. Or if you are, you're seeking a way out of it to change. So that means your thinking is different. You're willing to go through the pain of saying, you know what, I'm wrong about some things, right? And you are willing to invest time, energy, effort, money, pleasure, even relationships sometimes, to pursue the goal of being who you are. You know, they say just be yourself. That is true. But to become yourself, to allow yourself to be yourself, not the persona, you know, that you've put out. I remember living as a persona, and I feel embarrassed for myself and ashamed and angry that I lived as that persona. Because at one point, I too wanted to be liked by society. I too wanted to please other people, and I gave up on myself to be what I thought I was supposed to be. When in my heart, I knew that was not the way, but little by little, I allowed it. Until one day, I didn't recognize myself from who I knew myself to be. But you cannot get that time back. You cannot reverse that time. So your best bet is to start afresh, is to start where you are now and start doing things differently. To start valuing yourself, to start appreciating yourself. As a man, first and foremost. And it's something that takes a while, probably a lifetime. But we cannot discard the fact that we are men. Because there's nothing that a man hates more than feeling lesser than another man. But the only way you feel that way is if you are a lesser man than you are. So if you are yourself fully, you will not feel lesser than anybody. You will not feel inferior to anyone because you will know your worth. You understand the absoluteness of your masculinity. So you know the external things that people use to measure are not what make you you. And you start gathering things and doing things more because you want them, right? So when you, let's say, whereas before you might have bought a sports car to impress people, you may say, do you know what? I don't really want that sports car. I want this one. Yeah, nobody knows what that car is, but that's the one I like. Oh, I don't need this huge mansion. I want to travel instead. Or whatever it is that you want to do. Oh, these people don't like me anymore because I am not going to play all these things that people play. This is sometimes I'm like, why are you doing it? Like, I'm not going to do game night with these couples that every husband is berated by his wife or put down by his wife or by his girlfriend or fiancé or whatever. I'm not going to go to games night and watch that. So now everybody thinks I'm an asshole and my wife thinks I'm an asshole. Yes, I am an asshole. I'm not coming. I'll play video games by myself in my room. And if you insist on disrespecting me, we can end this relationship right now. A lot of people think that's extreme, but it's not. It's extreme to be in an environment where you watch men being put down and you participate in that. It is wrong for your children to witness you being spoken about in a certain way. That's wrong. And I know it's normal in the society, which is why we ask the question. Western men, is it the end of masculinity. Well, it's the end of today's show. Thank you so much. This is John Paul from bravefathers.com. I'll speak to you soon.